Fei. Like Fei said, it's nice to see some faces, but totally understand if you're not comfortable being on camera since it's being recorded. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri Willen people, and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Also like to pay my respects to the elders of countries on which you might be tonight. You might not be on Wurundjeri country, which is Greater Melbourne, and pay my respect to any First Nations persons here with us tonight. I will share my screen. So hopefully you can all see that now. Cool. So tonight's session, firstly, thank you to Fei for organising tonight's session and helping out in the background. Tonight's session, we're going to look at what grants are, where you can find them, and a bit about what you can expect once you've found a grant that you want to apply for, and some quick tips about understanding and applying for that grant. If you have any questions, like Fei said, feel free to put them into the chat so that you don't forget what that question was. We'll stop a couple of times throughout the session to answer questions, and hopefully we should be able to get through all of them. After the session, you'll also get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation and a link to the recording so that you can have that for your reference when you find some grants that you want to apply for. All right, so first question, what is a grant? So a grant is an amount of money that the government or another institution might give an individual or an organisation for a particular purpose. So essentially grant money, as long as you use it in the way that whoever's giving you the money has said that you need to use it, it's money that you don't have to repay. So depending on the grant program, so when we think about the particular purpose, what we're thinking about is, so it might be a grant just for sports, or it might be for environmental causes, so fighting climate change or tree planting. One of the ones that we have at the City of Whittlesea is cultural heritage. So any events or projects that help promote culture. There are so many different grants given out each year that you can find a grant for almost anything. But in saying that, not everyone is eligible to apply for every grant. So you've got to be a bit careful about which ones you search for, because some of them might be just for an individual person, while other ones you might have to be a group or a charity or a sports club, for example. So we know what a grant is. Where do you go looking for them? So in Australia, the grants are from three main sources. So the first one being government. Government grants can come from the federal or national level of government, and those grants are usually for bigger activities that generally affect the whole country. So two of the main areas that the national government supports are, there have been a lot of bushfire recovery grants lately and COVID recovery grants. They also support research and health. So research and health in particular, your university might be applying for grants to support their research, and universities and hospitals usually apply for those kind of categories. The next level of government is the state government. And those grants usually support activities within the state. So I know from looking for grants for different groups, Victoria has had a lot more COVID recovery grants than other areas of the country. And that's because we had longer, stricter lockdowns, so a lot of business support. There's also been a lot of multicultural and multi-faith event grants run through Victorian state government. And then the third level of government is local government, so your local council. And each council offers grants based on what the local community needs. So, for example, at the City of Whittlesea, we have some sports grants, community development grants, events, environmental activities, some business grants. So it just depends on what the priorities are within the local area that you're living in. The other group that gives out some grant money are businesses. So this is usually bigger businesses. So think of, supermarkets like IGA, the community chest that they have. Commonwealth Bank have some community grants, and NAB Bank or NAB Foundation have community grants as well. The other main source of grants in Australia are what's called philanthropic giving. It's a mouthful, but it basically means a person or an organisation who might have a lot of money, or they make a good profit and they want to share that money to support people or help solve problems. So one of the more famous philanthropists is Richard Branson, and he donates a significant amount of the profits from Virgin Travel to help fight climate change. So these types of grants are usually given to organisations who are registered as a charity or who have what's called deductible gift recipient status, or DGR status. So if you're part of a charity, and these are the grants that you could apply for. I find that most people start finding grants at local council level and then work on getting grants from other areas. So the stages of a grant. So in the grant application process, there are five main stages that most grant programs will go through. So the first one of those is the application period. Then you have the assessment period. If you're successful, sign in an agreement. The funding period, and an acquittal, or when you need to report on whatever it is that you've been funded to do. I might pause for a second because it's quite a bit of information already, and just check if there are any questions. Feel free to unmute if you're comfortable to do so. All right, we might keep moving. Sorry, I can't. Give me 2 seconds. All right. All right, so you found a grant that you want to apply for. The first thing that you need to do is apply for the grant, so the application period. So this is when the grant program is open for people to submit their information. It's really important to check what the closing date and time of the application period is. Oh, sorry, double check the guidelines. All of this information will be in the guidelines. Think of this as your assignment writing time. So you should be checking the guidelines to make sure you know the closing date and time. So one of the biggest tips I can give is double check what time the grant applications close. A lot of people might think, oh yeah, it closes at midday or midnight, and then find out when you go to submit the application in the afternoon that it's shut at midday. It's also a really great time to get advice. So if you're ever not sure about anything that's in the guidelines, call the person that's giving the grant, or send them an email. Definitely clarify anything that you're not sure of. And it's also, make sure that you have, if they're asking for proof of your group's members, or if they're asking for a bank statement, make sure you've got that stuff ready to go earlier rather than later. Like I said, think of it as an exam, or, assignment writing time, when you don't want to be up at 2 o'clock the morning before it gets submitted. Other things that you might want to check on are, is it open for individuals if it's something you're looking for? Or do you have to have a certain tax status, like the DGR status? And checking the guidelines is going to make sure that you're not going to waste your time. So as someone that gives out grant money, I understand that it takes people a lot of time to write an application, and you'd hate to, go through all that effort and then find out later that you weren't actually able to get the money because you weren't eligible. It was only for individuals, but you wanted it for a group. All right, next one.
So there's a question. Diana is asking, is there a grant for social work?
Social work. So not at the City of Whittlesea. You might look at, maybe, it depends what you wanted to do. So it might be community development more than social work, but it's still supporting the local community. Sorry, let me move that there. Okay, so the assessment period. So you've submitted your application, and then it might go a little bit quiet for a while. So you won't hear anything from the people giving out the grant money, but this is when they're assessing all of the applications that have come in. So one of the grant programs that we ran last year, we had 148 applications. So it does take a little bit of time. So remember to be patient. Okay. So the assessment period is broken down into 3, mini steps. So the first one is eligibility. So making sure that you or your group are suitable, and that the activity is suitable for the grant program that you've selected. Okay. So once the grant maker has worked out who is eligible to apply, and they've taken out the ones that aren't eligible, those eligible applications then go to assessors to be marked, basically. And scores in some cases might be ranked from highest to lowest, and then money is given out to those higher ranking ones until they run out of money. It's a little bit hard for me to give advice on what that means, what the assessment means, because it's really different for different grant programs. So some of them might be assessed by community members, others might be looked at by people within the organisation. It might be one person looking at the grant, it might be a panel of 10 people looking at the grant. But usually once they've been assessed, there will also be an approval process that the grant has to go through. So at council, we will have 2 officers who will, 2 staff that will look at the grant applications and give them a score. But then we also have to get our manager to say, yep, I agree, those ones are fine, before we can let you know whether you've got the money or not. All right, so signing the agreement. So most grant programs, if not all grant programs, will need you to sign an agreement or a conditions of grant document before they'll send out the money to you. So keep in mind that the agreement is a legal document. So what you're signing something that you have to abide by. The agreement should outline what you're agreeing to do or what you're agreeing not to do, what to do if you need to make any changes. So, yeah, good old COVID, we had a lot of grants that we gave out in late 2019. And because of COVID, a lot of people had to make changes or they had to, get extensions. And part of the agreement we had was that they had to let us know in writing and that we both had to agree to the changes. Dispute resolution. So if you don't agree, if you wanted to make a change or wanted to make have an extension for your project that you wanted to run and the person giving you the money doesn't agree, so what can you do next? Reporting requirements as well. So I always like to make sure that if you're given grant money, I'll let you know at the start what you need to report on so that you know what to keep an eye out for during the funding period. It also outlines when you need to report and if there's any particular way you need to send your reports in at the end of your project. So for City of Whittlesea, we use a system called Smarty Grants. And part of our reporting requirement is that you submit your final report through that system. There are some bigger grants that if you get funding for, say, 3 years, you might need to report every year. So the funding period. So this is basically the time that you have to complete the project or whatever it is that you've applied for. So how you use this time is completely up to you, but I've kind of broken it down into those 3 steps. So planning, you've already got the project idea, but now that you've got the money, you can work out exactly what needs to happen and when. So you might have said, yep, we're going to put on this event in August. What has to happen between now and August to make sure that event happens? Also plan in that time when you're going to do the reporting and who's responsible for the reporting. The activity, so doing exactly what you've said you would do and what you've applied for. And then the acquittal or reporting stage. So letting the grant provider know what you've done and what the outcomes were. Like I said before, it's always nice to know when you're going to report. And if you happen to apply for a grant from elsewhere and they don't give you that information up front, I would recommend asking for it just so you know that in 6 months' time, they're going to ask me for certain documents, or they're going to ask for what's happened in the first 6 months and then what might happen in the next 6 months, just so you can keep track of and take notice of certain things that they're going to ask you for. So as you guessed, the last stage is the acquittal or reporting part of the grant. So you'll be asked to provide different information depending on how long the grant period was, or the funding period, sorry. The purpose of the grant and how much money you were given. So most reports or final reports or acquittals will cover what actually happened. Like I said before, always let the grant provider know beforehand if there's going to be any changes. How you spent the money is usually quite important. mostly grant providers are checking to make sure that you've spent the whole grant amount, and also that you've spent it on things that were agreed at the start, or if you've had to tell them that you need to make changes, that's how you've spent the money. It's also a really good process to go through so that you can double check whether you've planned correctly and you were really close to what you thought you would spend, or perhaps you thought you'd spend $100 on catering and then it's ended up being $1,000. So it helps you plan for next time as well. So what were the outcomes? So this can be in the form of data. So, how many people attended the sessions? Was it what you expected? Did you have more people attending than what you thought? Were there fewer people? But also, did you as an organizer of a project or event, or anyone who attended, what did you get out of what did they get out of the activity? Did you gain some new skills, or did you get feedback that people created new friendships and are now going out more? So never underestimate the emotional or the community benefits that come out of a project as well. Don't focus just on how many people turned up. And supporting documents. So I think the best part of my job is actually checking the reports that come in and seeing some great photos of people coming together and having a good time, or it just brings life to the grant for me. Because there are so many grant programs, I don't always get to go out and see the projects firsthand, so it's really nice for me to see some photos at the end of it. Double check as well whether the grant provider wants you to have invoices or receipts presented, or you might want to provide some of your marketing material just to give the grant provider an information, just a little bit of added detail. That is a lot of information very quickly. So I might pause for a second and see if there are any other questions, either in the chat or if anyone wants to unmute.
I do have one question, but it's a little bit before.
Yeah, sure.
Once you applied and there's this waiting period before you are accepted or not. Mm-hmm. Do grants, we applied for Arts Council, so Federal Arts Council, and so we haven't got back from them. Does that mean that we haven't been accepted? Is silence one thing, or they usually said you were not successful for this occasion?
Good question. So it depends on how many people applied. So usually they'll say in the grant guidelines whether they will contact everyone or whether they'll only contact the successful groups.
Okay.
If it's been, say, 3 or 4 weeks, I would recommend just giving them a call and just saying, hey, just checking in to see what's happening. So yeah, patience is one thing, but then, sometimes it goes a little bit too long, and you need to know as well as a group or an individual whether you've got the money coming or not.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, definitely. Cool. And I have another question. When you said that there's changes, there can be changes, of course, in the budget, but is there any other changes that we need to address? I assume they must be big changes. For example, I'm working in this theater social inclusive musical. So I don't reckon maybe the artistic director can be a bit spontaneous in some things in his work, but the essence of the work is still the same. Does that count? Like, I don't reckon it should be as a major change?
Yeah, so major changes, definitely let the grant provider know. It's up to you if you want to discuss those smaller things with the grant provider. Some of the groups that City of Whittlesea supports do get in touch with me for very little things, which is not a bad thing. You know, we end up developing a bit of a relationship as well. If, you know, if you said you were going to put on a show on a Friday night, but the ticket sales haven't happened, so we're going to do it on a Saturday night, the grant provider probably doesn't need to know those smaller details. But like you said, the major things, like we were going to put on one show, but we now want to do 4 shows. Those are the kind of things that they would need to know.
Okay.
It's more about making sure that they don't get surprises when you do your final report and go, hey, we gave you money to do 2 shows and you did 10. What was that about?
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Beautiful. Thank you.
That's all right. Welcome. All right. So assessment criteria. This is one of the main things. So you've checked the dates of when the grant closes. You've checked that you're eligible for the grant. The next most important thing, or equally important thing, is the assessment criteria. So as you'd know from studying, the assessment criteria tells you how your application is going to be scored. And the criteria depends on the grant program. Some of the criteria that we at the City of Whittlesea ask people to address are the aims and outcomes. So what are you going to do? Why do you want to do it? And what do you hope you will get out of it? Assessors are looking to see if your activity lines up with the purpose of the grant program. The next one is local need. So is this activity, event, project something that the local community want or need? So, sometimes we have ideas and we think about running activities because it's something that we or a small group or even, whatever group that you're part of is interested in running. But then if it's something that has to be open for the whole community and there's not much interest in the rest of the community, then it might not be as successful. Local support. So here we look at whether you're working with other groups or other businesses, individuals to run the activities that you're planning. If you're running, so if you are partnering with someone else to help with the activities that you're asking for money for, it shows that you've already started planning and that you're really committed to running the activity. So you might not get the money from a grant, but you're probably going to do the project or activity anyway. Equity, access, and inclusion. So it is quite a few fancy words, but basically what we're looking at are how are you going to make the event safe and welcoming for people from different backgrounds and experiences. So some examples of this could include making sure people from different cultural or language groups or faith groups understand what's going on and how they're welcome or how they can be involved. Similarly, you might look at making sure that people who are same-sex attracted or gender diverse feel welcome and safe, or making sure that people with disability are able to safely access or attend the activities, just as anyone else would be able to. When thinking about disability and access, always think about the hidden disabilities as well, the invisible disabilities. So a lot of people will think about wheelchair access, but I'd really encourage you to think about, people who may be on the autism spectrum that might need some quiet space. and some time out from everything. Think about people who may be deaf or hearing impaired or vision impaired, and how else can you communicate with them? So do you need to have more pictures rather than a lot of written English? And finally, in the assessment criteria for the City of Whittlesea, we look at the budget as well. So is it reasonable? And by that we mean, you know, if you're running a one-day event and you're expecting 10 people to come, you wouldn't think that you would be asking for, you know, $10,000. Or if you were doing a 10-week activity, you would expect catering to maybe cost more than $10 in total. All right, so some tips for the assessment criteria. So my first suggestion, look at how much each criteria is worth. So a lot of grant programs will say, you know, the aims and outcomes are worth 30%, the budget's worth 5%. If the grant guidelines that you're looking at don't include that information, it won't harm your chances of getting the grant if you ring and ask whoever's giving you the grant or whoever you're applying to. It shows that you're really interested in the grant, and it makes sure that you spend the right amount of time on each section. So very similar to assignments, and making, you don't want to spend 2 hours on a 5% budget and 20 minutes on a 30% aims and outcomes section. The other thing is double check the wording. So by that I mean double check the wording of the assessment criteria and the application questions, excuse me. So under each of the questions that we have in our grant applications, we'll have a little bit of a hint, and under each of the criteria we'll have a hint as well. So that gives you an idea of what information you should be providing. One of the questions that we use regularly is, how will you enable community members from diverse backgrounds to be involved in the project or event? So basically, how are you going to make things safe and welcoming for people from different backgrounds? The answer we most often get to this question is, we will welcome everyone, which is good, but it doesn't tell me how you will welcome everyone. So just double check, is it a how question? Is it a what question or a why question? Because you can give a lot more information if you focus on how you're going to make something more welcoming, rather than just saying we accept everyone. My other tip with assessment criteria is, if you can answer these 6 questions that are on the screen, so when, where, what, who, how, and why, that makes sure that even, the criteria might have a lot of fancy words, they might be really hard to understand, but if you can fit in really strong answers to these 6 questions, then you've got a better chance of getting a grant. All right, some other tips. Okay, always start by checking that you're eligible, or your group is eligible to apply for the grant. Like I've said previously, you don't want to spend, a week, 2 weeks, even an hour getting all your documentation together and writing an application, only to find out that you weren't eligible and it's been a waste of time. If you've read the guidelines and you're still not sure, and don't worry, it's not just you, because some of the grant programs out there aren't very clear about who can apply. just send an email or call whoever's giving out the grant. Asking questions is never going to disadvantage you from being given a grant. Okay, always have a project or an activity idea ready to go before you start looking for the money. So some groups get into the trap of going, we need money, let's get the grant first and then we'll decide what to do with it. As we've already kind of discussed, you need to be able to report at the end of it, and you also need to be able to let the grant provider know if there are any changes. So if you don't really know what you're going to do, then it's really hard to explain that to a grant provider, and it's really hard to say, oh, actually, we need to change this now. The way I was thinking about this earlier was, think about it as having a recipe before you go to the shops to get ingredients. There's no point in having a whole lot of ingredients sitting there waiting and then not knowing what to do with all of them. And prepare ahead of applying. So if you're part of a group, a student group, community group, arts group, whatever it is, think about the things that you can write before you start looking for money. So each grant application has some common things to it. So you can get those ready, put them in a Word document, save them somewhere. So each time you apply, you can just cut and paste and maybe change a couple of words. It might be, what does your group do? Or what is your mission or purpose for the group? Where are you located? Where do you operate from? Where do you operate from? Where are you located? Might be smaller questions. But anything that saves you a little bit of time of typing is, I'm there for it. Give yourself enough time to write the application. So plan what you want to say. I recommend using a Word document so you can keep a track of word counts if that's something that you need to consider. Write a draft. Take a break from it. So this is where, make sure you've got plenty of time. Take a break from it and then come back to it. So many times I've written different documents and thought, yeah, it's great, but let me go away for a little while and come back to realize that I've left out major parts of information. Make sure you check if you need to provide supporting documentation. So if you need to be an incorporated group, then do you need to supply a copy of your certificate, or do you need to supply a copy of a bank statement or a letter of support from any other groups that you're working with? Making sure you've got that ahead of time. It just prevents that last minute rush of going, it's due at midnight, it's now 10 p.m. and I've just realized I don't have this letter, and you don't really want to ring people from another community organization who are helping you out. Probably not a great idea to ring them too late in the evening. So if you can get that stuff ahead of time, it just prevents a whole lot of stress for you when it comes to submitting. And ask someone else for feedback. So I'm sure I heard this in my uni days that, if I can get if I can get someone else to understand it, someone that's not studying the stuff that I'm studying, someone that's not part of my group when I'm applying for grants, if they understand it, then there's a good chance that the people assessing it are going to understand it. Because we need to assume that the assessors don't know anything. it's really interesting looking at grants that come into the City of Whittlesea and seeing, you know, because you live that group, you're part of that group, the mum's test. If you're part of that group, you understand it. And it's sometimes you forget to explain that to other people because you go, well, I know it, you know it. I would rather get too much information in a grant application instead of you missing that one really important piece of information that we needed to be able to give you a higher score. And don't give up. As you know, there's a lot of grant money out there, and just because you don't get the first one that you apply for or the 10th one that you apply for doesn't mean that you're not going to get the next one. Ask for feedback if you submit an application and you didn't get funded. Ask for feedback. That way you can develop your grant writing skills and get better and better. Keep in mind that different grant providers ask for different things, but you know, you can always learn from, you know, the ones that you didn't get money from. All right, so at the City of Whittlesea, some of the grant programs that we have, and like I said, different councils, local governments have different grant programs based on what the local needs are, but some of the more common ones are the sports, community grants, maybe some business grants. At the City of Whittlesea, we have the new and emerging group grants. So we help with a little bit of money for groups to get set up. So it might be money to pay for incorporation fees or insurances, maybe a little bit of equipment. Cultural heritage grants, which I mentioned before, so promoting, different groups promoting their culture to the wider community, or it could even be preserving culture so that, you know, younger generations aren't going to lose those cultures and traditions. Community event funding, so exactly, I guess, what the title says. So we'll support different groups to put on, they could be quite small neighbourhood events, or we also have some funding for bigger festival type events. Community development grants, so grants that support the local community. And that could be, it could be a one-off event. We've had some, you know, community gardens projects or community cooking lesson projects. It just really depends on what the need is at the time. And if any of you are part of sporting clubs, so we have a female inclusion in sport grant as well. So promoting women and girls in sport and their involvement in all levels of sport. So coaches, umpires as players as well. All right, so resources and support. So I will provide some links to these resources as well with the recording and the slides that you get. But our community have a web, so they look after the Smarty Grant system, but they also have what's called the funding centre. So they have some help sheets on grant writing or, you know, planning to write grants. The funding centre also, so the help sheets are a free resource. The grant opportunities, you need to be a part of you need to pay a membership to go through their list of grant opportunities. But they do have a couple that they show you for free. My advice would be copy and paste the name of the grant program into Google and you'll always find the resource somewhere else as well. Our community also has quite a few free training webinars. So it might be, and they're really really varied. So it might be about how you run a group. It might be looking at mental health within the group. It might be specifically looking at finances. So it's always a good idea to keep an eye on those. You might not need it now, the different webinars, but you might know someone that does, or it might just develop your skills for the next project. Check out your local council website. That's the City of Whittlesea one there. But if you're located elsewhere, most councils have grant programs that they run, if not all of them. And, you know, even if you go to the main website, so in our case, whittlesea.vic.gov, and search in the search bar for grants. I also send out a monthly newsletter, which provides grant and training opportunities for community groups. And the grants officer within council is always a great resource. So there are a lot of things that council, well, the City of Whittlesea can't fund. But I'm always happy to, you know, keep my eyes out and see if there's anything else that I can find online or through my networks that might be available. That's it. We've kind of wrapped up really quickly. I know there's a lot of information in there. I'm going to put that one back up. So you've got my number and my email if you've got any questions, but we've got a bit of time now as well if you wanted to ask anything else.
Yes,
Yeah.
Councils. It doesn't matter. I don't know how much is the influence of me applying to a grant from my council that we are not, or I don't know, maybe when you said that supporting local artists or local communities, maybe of course my eligibility will not apply if the group or theater does not reside or rehearse near the area. But are there any chances, or is it possible or worth looking at grants for another city councils?
Yeah, it's worth like checking what's out there. I guess it depends really on what you want to do. I know with the City of Whittlesea, we had, due to COVID, we had some grants specifically for artists who had to be located within the City of Whittlesea. But then we have the community development grants where you can be located outside of the, you know, you could be located on the other side of Melbourne, but as long as you're going to come to our area and provide that program or project, then we would look at funding it.
Okay.
So yeah, it's definitely worth keeping an eye out, especially in the councils that are around your area. So it might not be the one that you live in or the one that you go to school or uni in, but having a look around at the ones, you know, surrounding might be a good opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. So I believe it's worth having a conversation first with the council, perhaps, to see opportunities of maybe performing there or performing, I don't know, in the library or the city hall of the council, and maybe after that conversation applying for the grant and making sure that we are having that space to be eligible.
Yeah, and I guess that's the other thing as an artist as well. So it might not be supporting through a grant, but, you know, is it the arts and events team that could help with helping you put on shows or classes or whatever it might be?
Gorgeous, beautiful, thank you.
No worries. Do we have any other questions? All right. So I feel like I've either really explained it really well or I've really confused everyone. But yeah, my email's there if you want to just ask for any more information, if anything hasn't made sense, or you want to go away and have a think about all of the information that we've given and then come back and ask some questions, we can do that as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Krystle.
That's all right. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Krystle.
All right, you're welcome. So thank you for tuning in, everyone. And we'll send out the recording and some links to some resources.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And yeah, I also have for Paul, thank you for coming and thank you for the great presentation, because I learned a lot as well, and you really explained it very well. And yeah, I hope everyone learned a lot as well. And I know there's a lot of information. People might need to digest a little bit before they come back with any questions. It always happens. Yeah, but yeah, there's a contact details of Krystle as well. So feel free to email Krystle later on as well. And we have a little bit more to also give us a bit of idea how the session went. If you can vote, if you can vote quickly before you leave. I know it's quite cold now and you might be hungry, you might want to have dinner. So for us to give us a bit of idea how the session helped you. And we might run more sessions like this to help international students as well. So can you please vote? Can you see? Can you see the poll? Yes. Oh, I see lots of yes. Wonderful. Yeah. Thumb up. That's all yes. I love how people say, you know, not even maybe, and that's just all confirmed yes. Yeah. And if you have any comments, please feel free to leave in the chat box as well. And if you would like to learn more information about grants, and I will send out the email, include my email as well. So you're welcome to have discussion with me and how we can improve the session, or what other information you would like to learn about as well. Yeah, so are we all good? Sorry, someone is speaking.
No, I just say thank you so much, Faith and Krystle, for this information. It was very useful.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Yeah, and thank you for anyone who asked questions as well. Because, you know, if you ask, it means it really helped you and you wanted to clarify and learn more. So I always love people who ask questions. All right, so I'll see in the poll. Thank you, everyone voted. So as you can see, that's all yes, very useful, very informative, and feel more confident to explore grants and have a very good understanding of that. Oh my God, Krystle, you really nailed it. Yeah, you explained very well. And I love how you use the simple language for people to understand as well. So I really love that. Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, we might call the end for the day. If nobody has any more questions for Krystle or for me. And this, this project is supported by Study Melbourne and the state government, and it's part of Whittlesea International Student Wellbeing Project. So yeah, so if you wanted to know more activities, I will provide my email so you can stay updated with more activities in Whittlesea as well. And thank you, everyone. I think, yeah, that's all. If you want to leave, feel free to say hi and bye. And if you guys want to connect, so in the email, I'll also mention about if anyone want to discuss grants together, I'm happy to also connect you as well with your consent, of course. Krystle, do you have anything else to say?
No, just thank you for coming along tonight. I hope everyone got something out of it. It is a lot of information. So honestly, go away, have a think. If you want me to clarify anything, I'm more than happy to have a chat on the phone or through email. But otherwise, good luck with any grants that you might be applying for. Yeah, thank you for coming along.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah. I'll stop recording.